The black maid was falsely accused, until the Mafia boss stepped in. Maria Bennett had been a maid at the Romano mansion for just over a year, but in that time, she'd already witnessed more wealth and power than she could have ever imagined growing up in the rough neighborhoods of Brooklyn. She was proud of the work she did, keeping everything in pristine condition for the Romano family, but she knew her place. She was just the maid, invisible in a house full of luxury and prestige. Today was different, though. Maria had just finished dusting the grand chandelier in the entrance hall when she overheard a conversation from the dining room. She could hear the voices of the guests laughing, mingling, and then, suddenly, a sharp voice calling her name. "Maria, get in here." The voice of Mrs. Romano echoed through the hallway. Maria's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't used to being called into the dining room unless something was wrong. She walked in, her mind racing. Mrs. Romano was seated at the head of the long, marble table, her face stern as she looked at Maria. Beside her sat a group of guests, all well-dressed and holding glasses of wine, their eyes shifting between Maria and each other. "Maria, I don't know how to say this, but there's been a misunderstanding. Someone here believes you've been stealing from the family," Mrs. Romano said coldly. Maria froze, a knot tightening in her stomach. Stealing? She had never taken anything that didn't belong to her. The words hit her like a blow. "What?" Maria whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know who's been spreading these lies, but you need to clear this up immediately. We can't have accusations like this tarnishing our reputation." The guests around the table nodded in agreement, their eyes narrow with suspicion. Maria's pulse raced. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Someone was trying to frame her, and she had no idea why. She tried to explain herself, but the more she spoke, the less they seemed to believe her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stood there, helpless, under the weight of their judgment. Just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, the doors to the dining room slammed open with a sudden force. All eyes turned, and in the doorway stood Dominic Romano, the Mafia boss of the Romano family. His tall, imposing figure filled the room, and his sharp gaze swept across the guests and landed on Maria. The tension in the room was palpable as he stepped forward. "What's going on here?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that sent a shiver down Maria's spine. Mrs. Romano quickly stood, brushing her hands together nervously. "Dominic, we've had an issue. Maria has been accused of theft, and we need to sort this out." Dominic's eyes narrowed as he looked at the guests, then back at Maria. Without a word, he walked toward her, his gaze unwavering. "Maria," he said, his voice soft but commanding. "I know you, and I know you didn't steal anything." His words were like a weight lifted off her shoulders. The warmth of his confidence, of his belief in her, was enough to quell the storm inside her. The guests exchanged looks, stunned by his sudden intervention. Mrs. Romano's face turned pale, and for the first time, she seemed unsure of herself. Dominic turned to the guests, his voice steady. "If anyone has a problem with Maria, they have a problem with me," he said, his tone final. "I won't tolerate such lies in my house." The guests were silent, some of them visibly shrinking back under his gaze. Maria stood still, trying to process what had just happened. The Mafia boss, the powerful man who ruled everything around her, had stepped in to defend her. For the first time, she felt seen, truly seen, in a way she never had before. She wasn't just a maid anymore. In that moment, she was someone worth protecting. As the door to the dining room closed behind Dominic, Maria stood there, still in a daze, processing what had just happened. The room, once full of tension and accusations, now felt eerily quiet. Her heart was still racing, but something inside her had shifted. Dominic had stood up for her. A simple gesture, a few words, but it had made all the difference in the world. She had always thought of herself as just the maid, invisible in the grand mansion, blending into the background. But now, for the first time, she felt like she mattered. Dominic's calm, unwavering confidence had given her something she hadn't realized she needed: validation. The guests, still stunned by his intervention, quickly averted their eyes and began to murmur among themselves. Mrs. Romano stood at the far end of the table, her posture stiff, her face pale, as if she couldn't believe what had just occurred. She opened her mouth to speak, but Dominic raised a hand, silencing her. "I'll take care of this," he said, his voice cold and commanding. He turned to Maria then, his gaze softening for a moment. Maria, come with me. Maria nodded, still trying to process the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She followed him out of the dining room and down the long, luxurious hallway of the mansion, her footsteps echoing against the marble floors. She had always admired the elegance of the house, the gleaming chandeliers, the towering columns, but right now, everything felt distant. She was lost in her thoughts, still feeling the sting of the false accusation. Dominic led her to his study, a room that was both imposing and inviting. The dark wood furniture, the rich leather chairs, the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes she could never afford. It was a world that seemed so far removed from her own. Sit, he said, motioning to one of the chairs across from his desk. Maria hesitated for a moment before sitting down, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up at him, but he was already seated at his desk, his hands resting on the surface. He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes intense, as if weighing something. I don't know what's going on here, Maria, he said, his voice softer now. But I'll find out. No one in my house gets treated like that, not while I'm around. Maria swallowed, the lump in her throat making it hard to speak. I didn't do anything wrong, Mr. Romano. I don't know why they would accuse me like that. Dominic leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. I know you didn't. I trust you, Maria. But I want to know who did this. I won't let anyone get away with it. Maria's heart fluttered at his words. He trusted her. For a moment, she felt like she could finally breathe again. The weight of the accusation was still there, but it didn't seem as heavy now. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You don't have to thank me, Dominic replied. Just don't ever think you're invisible around here. You're part of this family now, whether you like it or not. His words, though simple, struck Maria deeply. Part of the family. She had never imagined hearing those words, not in a place like this. It felt like a dream. I'll take care of the situation, Dominic continued. I'll make sure the truth comes out. No one will dare to accuse you of anything again. Maria nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. Dominic stood up and walked to the window, his back turned to her. You're not just some maid, he said, his voice low. You have more value than you know. Maria felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that before. It wasn't pity or sympathy, it was respect. Dominic turned to face her again, his expression serious. Now, I want you to go back to your duties. But remember, if anyone ever treats you like that again, you come to me. Understand? Maria nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Yes, Mr. Romano. Thank you. Dominic's lips curled into a small smile. It's Dominic, Maria. Don't forget that. As she left his study, Maria felt a strange sense of empowerment. The events of the day had turned her world upside down, but in a way, it had also opened her eyes. She wasn't just a maid in this grand house. She was someone worth protecting, someone who mattered. And maybe, just maybe, the man who had stepped in to defend her was more than just the Mafia boss. He was someone who had shown her that even in a world full of power and wealth, kindness still had a place. Days passed, and Maria couldn't shake the events that had unfolded in the Romano mansion. She had always known her place in the grand scheme of things. She was just the maid, the invisible worker in a house full of luxury and power. But now, everything felt different. Dominic Romano, the powerful Mafia boss, had defended her. He had seen her, truly seen her, in a way that no one else had. As the days went by, the weight of his words lingered in her mind. Asterisk, you're part of this family now. Asterisk, Maria hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. She had grown up with the constant feeling of being overlooked, dismissed, as if she didn't matter. But now, Dominic had changed that. Every time she passed by the grand dining room or the study, her heart would race, remembering how he had stood up for her, how he had spoken to her with respect. The days that followed were strange for Maria. Her duties didn't change. She still cleaned the rooms, polished the furniture, and made sure the house ran like a well-oiled machine. But now, there was an unspoken understanding between her and Dominic. There was no longer that wall of distance between them. One afternoon, as she was dusting the large mirror in the foyer, she saw him again. Dominic was walking toward her, his presence as imposing as ever. He was dressed in his usual sharp suit, but today, there was something different in his expression. He wasn't just the Mafia boss now. He was someone who, in some strange way, seemed to care about her well-being. "Maria," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of concern, "how are you holding up?" Maria was taken aback. She hadn't expected him to ask. He had never spoken to her like this before, and it made her feel as if she mattered. "I'm doing all right, Mr. Romano," she said, her voice steady, though inside, her emotions were swirling. She still wasn't used to being treated with such kindness. "That's good," he replied. "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to let me know. I want to make sure you're comfortable here. This is your home too." Maria's heart skipped a beat. This is your home too. It was such a simple statement, yet it carried so much weight. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged. As the days passed, Maria began to notice the subtle changes in her life. Dominic didn't just offer her protection from the accusations. He began to treat her with a respect that went beyond mere politeness. He would nod in her direction when they crossed paths, offer small words of encouragement, and, on rare occasions, even ask about her life outside of the mansion. Maria wasn't sure if this was just the way Dominic treated everyone, but she couldn't deny the growing sense of gratitude she felt toward him. One evening, as she was leaving the kitchen after preparing dinner, she saw him again. He was standing near the grand staircase, looking out over the balcony as if lost in thought. She paused, unsure of whether to disturb him, but he turned and caught her gaze. "Maria, come here," he called softly, his voice carrying across the hallway. Maria walked toward him, her steps hesitant. "Yes, Mr. Romano?" she asked, trying to mask the nervousness in her voice. He looked at her with a slight smile. "I'm sorry to keep you working so late," he said, his tone sincere. "I know you've been doing a lot, and I wanted to personally thank you for your dedication." Maria blinked, surprised by his words. "Thank you." She had never expected to hear those words from him. She had always assumed her hard work went unnoticed, as it often did in the past. "You don't have to thank me, sir," she replied, her voice a little softer than usual. "It's my job." Dominic shook his head. "It's more than that, Maria. You've shown loyalty, and you've done it without ever asking for anything in return." He paused, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something almost vulnerable. "I don't take loyalty lightly." Maria stood there, speechless. She wasn't sure what to say to that. She had never thought of herself as loyal to anyone but her family. But here, in this moment, she felt as if she had earned something more, not just respect, but a sense of belonging. "I won't forget what you've done for me," Dominic continued, his voice quieter now. "And if there's ever anything you need, anything at all, don't hesitate to ask." Maria's heart swelled with emotion. It was rare for someone to offer such a thing, especially someone like Dominic, who had everything at his disposal. And yet, here he was, offering her the one thing she had never expected, a sense of worth. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic gave her a nod, his expression softening. "You're welcome, Maria." As she walked away, her mind raced. She had come to this mansion as just another maid, another face in the crowd, but now, she felt like she had become something more. The walls that had once separated her from the people in this house were slowly starting to crumble. And it wasn't just the physical walls of the mansion. It was the emotional distance that had always kept her in the shadows. With each passing day, Maria began to feel like she was finally stepping into the light, her place in this world no longer defined by her role, but by the respect she had earned and the kindness she had received. It had been a few weeks since Dominic had spoken those words to Maria, and in that time, things had changed, though it was hard to pinpoint exactly when the shift had occurred. She still carried out her duties with the same diligence she always had, but now, there was a newfound sense of respect in the way she moved through the mansion. It was as if the weight of years of feeling invisible had been lifted from her shoulders. Maria had always done her job well, but now, she felt seen. Dominic had given her that. As the days went by, they found themselves crossing paths more often. He would pass her in the hallways, sometimes pausing to speak for a moment, a small compliment about the work she was doing or a word of encouragement that made her feel valued. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was more than she had ever expected from someone like him. One morning, as Maria was polishing the grand piano in the living room, she noticed him standing at the door, watching her quietly. She froze for a moment, not sure what to expect. He had a habit of appearing out of nowhere, always with that aura of quiet authority. "Good morning, Maria," he said with a nod, his tone casual but warm. Maria stood up straight, surprised by the greeting. "Good morning, Mr. Romano." She caught herself, then quickly corrected. "I mean, Dominic." He smiled, faintly, and for a moment, there was something almost gentle in his expression. "No need to be formal with me, Maria," he said. "You've earned the right to speak freely." She nodded, still feeling the strange mix of nerves and gratitude that always seemed to follow his presence. "Thank you, Dominic," she said quietly, unsure of how else to respond. He studied her for a moment, his gaze softening. "You've been doing great work around here. I've noticed." Maria's heart fluttered. It wasn't just his words, but the sincerity behind them that touched her deeply. In all her years of working for wealthy families, she had never been treated this way. She had never been noticed for anything other than her role as the maid. "I'm just doing my job," she said, a little embarrassed. "You're doing more than that," he replied, his voice firm but kind. "You're making a difference in this house. People like you don't get enough credit." Maria was at a loss for words. It felt like a dream, hearing these things from someone like him. "Thank you," she finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, giving her a small, approving smile before turning to leave. "I'm going to be in my office if you need anything." As he walked away, Maria stood there for a moment, still processing the conversation. She had never imagined that one of the most powerful men in the city, the head of the Romano crime family, would treat her with such respect. But there it was, a simple exchange that made her feel like she mattered. Over the following weeks, their interactions became more frequent, though always brief. He would stop by for a quick word of encouragement or to ask if she needed anything. It wasn't just about the work anymore. It was about showing her that she was valued, something that she had never experienced before. One afternoon, as she was walking through the kitchen, she caught sight of Dominic again, this time standing by the window, looking out at the sprawling gardens. He didn't seem to notice her at first, and for a moment, Maria simply stood there, watching him. He had always carried himself with an air of authority, but lately, she had begun to see another side of him. He wasn't just the ruthless Mafia boss everyone feared. There was something more beneath the surface. She cleared her throat, not wanting to interrupt his thoughts. "Dominic?" she asked softly. He turned around, his expression softening when he saw her. "Maria," he said with a slight smile. "I didn't mean to startle you." "No, it's all right," she replied, walking toward him. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to see if you needed anything." "Actually," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly, "there is something." Maria raised an eyebrow, wondering what he meant. "What is it?" she asked. "Would you be willing to stay on for a few more weeks? I need someone reliable around here, and I've come to trust you." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "Of course, I'd be happy to," she said quickly, her voice steady despite the rush of emotions. Dominic gave her a small nod of approval. "I'll make sure you're compensated fairly. I know this job isn't easy." "Thank you," Maria said, her voice full of gratitude. She wasn't sure why he had chosen her, but she wasn't about to question it. As she walked away, she felt a strange sense of pride. Dominic Romano, the man who controlled so much of the city, had just asked her to stay. Not because she was a maid, but because he saw something in her, something more than just her role in his household. And that, she realized, was more than she could have ever hoped for. The days that followed were filled with a sense of quiet purpose for Maria. She continued her work in the mansion with a new sense of dignity, but something in her had shifted. She was no longer just going through the motions of her job. She was doing it with pride, with a feeling of being truly seen. Dominic had made her feel like she mattered, and that small gesture of kindness had begun to change everything for her. Though the mansion was as grand and intimidating as ever, Maria found herself walking its halls with a newfound confidence. The other staff members, who had always kept their distance, began to treat her with a subtle respect. They no longer whispered behind her back or looked at her with the same dismissive glances they once had. It was as if Dominic's quiet support had made them see her differently. One evening, after dinner had been served, Maria was walking down the hallway near the study when she saw Dominic through the open door. He was standing by the large window, staring out into the night, his back turned to her. The room was dimly lit, and for a moment, she hesitated. She wasn't sure if she should interrupt, but something told her it was okay. She knocked softly on the doorframe. "Dominic," she called out, her voice quiet. He turned to face her, and the moment their eyes met, there was an unspoken understanding between them. "Maria," he said, his voice calm, but there was a warmth in it that made her heart flutter. "Come in. I wasn't expecting anyone." Maria stepped into the room, her hands nervously smoothing the fabric of her uniform. "I just wanted to check if you needed anything, sir," she said, but quickly corrected herself. "I mean Dominic." He smiled slightly, a genuine, almost affectionate smile that made her feel at ease. "I'm fine," he replied, though his expression grew more serious. "But I've been meaning to talk to you." Maria raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About you," he said, walking toward the desk and sitting down in the large leather chair. "I've noticed how hard you've been working. You've been here for quite some time now, and I wanted to make sure you're happy." Maria was taken aback. She had never expected him to ask about her happiness. I'm fine, really," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. "I'm doing what I love." "You're doing more than that," Dominic said, his tone firm. "You're doing more than just your job. You're part of this family now, Maria. I want you to feel like you belong here, not just as an employee, but as someone who matters." His words hit her like a wave, washing over her with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had never thought of herself as a part of anything, especially not something so powerful and important. She had always been on the outside, watching the world of wealth and privilege from a distance. But now, Dominic was telling her that she was a part of it, that she mattered. "Thank you," Maria whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Dominic's gaze softened. "You don't need to thank me. It's the least I can do. You've earned it." He stood up and walked over to where Maria was standing. "But there's something else I want to discuss." Maria looked at him, confused. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about your future here," he said, his tone thoughtful. "You're more than just a maid, Maria. You have potential. I've seen it. I want to give you more responsibility, something that reflects your value to this household." Maria blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "More responsibility? But I'm just the maid." Dominic shook his head. "You're not just anything, Maria. You're someone who deserves more. I want to give you the opportunity to take on more than what you've been doing. It's time for you to step into a bigger role." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined that someone like Dominic, someone with so much power and authority, would offer her such an opportunity. She had always believed that people like her were stuck in their roles, that they would never rise above their station. But here he was, offering her the chance to change her life. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw a spark of something. Hope, maybe, or understanding. "I want you to manage the household staff. Oversee everything. You know how things work here better than anyone. You're the one who makes sure everything runs smoothly." Maria's breath caught in her throat. This was beyond anything she could have imagined. "But I've never done anything like that before," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't have to do it alone," Dominic assured her. "I'll be here to guide you. But I believe you're more than capable." Maria stood there for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always felt like an outsider, but now, Dominic was offering her a chance to be part of something bigger, a chance to lead, to make a difference. She couldn't believe it. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude and disbelief. Dominic smiled, a rare smile that softened his usually stern face. "I'm glad you're willing to take this on. You won't regret it, Maria. I believe in you." As Maria left his study that night, she felt a sense of purpose she had never felt before. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone who had the power to make a real impact, someone who had earned a place in this world of power and privilege. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, not just as a maid, but as a person with value. The following weeks were filled with a strange, quiet energy. Maria had stepped into her new role with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. As the manager of the household staff, she now had responsibility, respect, and a place of her own in the Romano mansion. It wasn't just about the tasks she managed. It was about the trust Dominic had placed in her. Every day, she walked through the halls with more confidence. She was no longer just a maid who cleaned the rooms and served the family. She was the one overseeing the operation of the mansion, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. It was empowering, but also daunting. There was so much to learn, so much that had to be perfect. But Maria embraced it. She found herself working closely with the staff, getting to know each of them on a deeper level. They weren't just faces she saw every day. They were colleagues, and slowly, she began to see the mansion as her own. One afternoon, as Maria was overseeing the kitchen staff preparing dinner, Dominic entered the room. His presence was commanding, as always, but today, there was something different in his demeanor. He wasn't just the boss anymore. He was someone who had come to trust her. "How's everything going?" he asked, his voice calm and measured. Maria turned to him, a slight smile on her face. "Everything's running smoothly, Dominic. The kitchen is on track for dinner, and the rest of the house is in order." He studied her for a moment, his eyes lingering on her. "I'm glad to hear that. I've noticed the changes. You've done a great job." Maria's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't often that Dominic expressed his approval, and when he did, it meant something. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but full of gratitude. "I appreciate the trust you've given me." He nodded, his expression softening for just a moment. "You've earned it, Maria. You're more than just a member of the staff now. You're someone who's important to this family." Maria felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was rare for her to hear such words. For so long, she had been invisible, but now, she felt like she was part of something that mattered. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice firm, determined. "I know you won't," Dominic replied, his gaze intense but approving. For a moment, there was silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if they both understood the unspoken bond that had formed. Maria had come into this house with nothing but a willingness to work hard, to make a living. But now, she had more than that. She had respect, trust, and a place where she truly belonged. Over the next few weeks, Maria continued to grow in her role. She was more than just the manager of the household staff. She was a part of the Romano family, at least in the sense that Dominic had treated her that way. The distance that had once existed between them had faded. They often spoke, and she found that he was more approachable than she had ever imagined. He wasn't just the Mafia boss who ruled over everything with an iron fist. He was a man with his own struggles, his own burdens, and Maria had come to understand that. One evening, after a particularly long day, Maria was finishing her duties in the living room when Dominic appeared in the doorway. "Maria," he said, his voice low. She turned to face him, surprised to see him there. "What's the matter?" she asked, her voice gentle, sensing that something was different about tonight. Dominic walked in and closed the door behind him, his usual composed demeanor replaced with something softer. "I just wanted to talk," he said, his gaze searching hers. "About everything. About you, about the staff, about how things are going." Maria felt a twinge of unease. She had never seen him like this before, so open, so vulnerable. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her concern evident. "Everything's fine," he replied, though there was a hesitation in his voice. "It's just, I've been thinking a lot about how things have changed." He paused, taking a deep breath. "You've changed things around here, Maria. You've made it better. And I think it's time I tell you something." Maria stood still, unsure of what to expect. Dominic's words were always measured, but tonight, there was something in his eyes, something that told her this conversation was more than just about the mansion or the staff. "What is it?" she asked softly. "I've been running this family, this empire, for a long time," Dominic said, his voice tinged with something like regret. "And I've made my share of mistakes. But the one thing I know is that people like you, people who show loyalty, who work hard without asking for anything in return, those people are rare. You're rare, Maria." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Maria swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. She had never expected such an admission from him. Dominic wasn't the type of man to show weakness or vulnerability, but here he was, offering her something she hadn't realized she needed, his respect. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to say." Dominic stepped closer, his expression softening even more. "You don't need to say anything," he replied. "I just want you to know that you've earned more than you realize. And I'm grateful to have you here, Maria." Maria's heart swelled with emotion. She had always thought she was just a maid, but now, she was something more. She was someone who had earned her place in this world. And Dominic had recognized that. As the days went by, Maria found herself growing even more in her role. The respect that had once felt so unfamiliar now felt like a part of her life, something she had earned and deserved. She wasn't just working in the mansion anymore. She was part of the Romano family, and that was a feeling she would never take for granted. Maria had come a long way since the day Dominic had first entrusted her with the responsibility of managing the household staff. It had been a journey filled with moments of doubt, growth, and, ultimately, a sense of belonging she had never known before. Now, months later, she stood in the grand hallway of the Romano mansion, feeling more at home than ever. The once intimidating space now felt like a place she could walk with pride, her steps echoing on the polished marble floors. As she passed by the study, she noticed Dominic sitting at his desk, his brow furrowed as he scrolled through papers. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by a rare look of deep concentration. Maria hesitated for a moment, then knocked softly on the doorframe. "Dominic," she called out, her voice gentle but clear. He looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers. For a moment, his expression softened, and the intensity that had been there moments before faded. "Maria," he said, his voice warm. "Come in." She stepped inside, the familiar weight of the air in the room wrapping around her. The room was dimly lit, a few lamps casting soft shadows across the walls. The faint smell of cigars lingered in the air, a reminder of Dominic's usual habits. "Everything all right?" she asked, her concern apparent. Dominic leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "It's just some business matters," he said, his tone a little strained. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Maria could tell something was on his mind. She had worked closely with him long enough to recognize when he was troubled, even if he didn't say it out loud. She moved to the chair in front of his desk, sitting down and folding her hands in her lap. "You know, if you ever need to talk, I'm here," she offered, her voice gentle but firm. Dominic's eyes flickered with something, gratitude, maybe, or surprise. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "I appreciate that, Maria," he said, his voice softening. I've been thinking about a lot of things lately. About this family, about everything." Maria listened quietly, letting him take his time. She knew that Dominic wasn't the kind of man to open up easily, so when he did, it was important to listen. "It's hard," he continued, his eyes distant. "This life, the weight of everything. Sometimes I wonder if I've made the right choices." Maria felt a pang of sympathy. She had always known Dominic as the powerful Mafia boss, the man who controlled everything around him with an iron fist. But in this moment, she saw something different in him, vulnerability. "You've done what you thought was best," she said, her voice steady. "And you've kept your family safe. I've seen that." Dominic's gaze shifted to her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You know, I didn't expect you to understand, but somehow you do." Maria didn't respond immediately, unsure of what to say. But she knew that what he needed right now wasn't advice or sympathy. He needed someone who would simply listen. And that was what she could do for him. "I don't have all the answers, Dominic," she said quietly. "But I do know one thing. You've made a difference. You've given me a place here, a chance to prove myself. And that means more to me than you know." He looked at her for a long moment, the silence between them comfortable, like a mutual understanding. "You've earned it," he said softly. "I can't say that about many people. But you, Maria, you've earned my trust." The words hit her like a wave, and for the first time, Maria felt a deep sense of pride. Dominic's approval was something she had never thought she'd receive, but here it was, and it meant everything. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Dominic stood up, walking around the desk to where Maria sat. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that felt both comforting and empowering. "You're not just a maid, Maria," he said, his voice low. "You're family. You've earned a place in this world, in this house, and I'm glad to have you here." Maria felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. It wasn't just the kindness he had shown her. It was the recognition, the acknowledgement of her worth. For so long, she had believed that she would always be invisible, that she would always be defined by her role. But now, for the first time, she was being seen as something more. Dominic's gaze softened as he stepped back, his expression almost unreadable. "You've done more than anyone could ask, Maria," he said quietly. "And I won't forget that." Maria stood up, her mind racing with everything he had just said. She had come so far, from being the invisible maid to someone who had earned a place in Dominic's world. The journey had been long, and it was far from over. But she was no longer just a part of the background. She was someone who mattered. and that realization made her feel stronger than she had ever felt before. The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings, responsibilities, and an overwhelming sense of change for Maria. She had taken on the task of managing the household staff with a quiet determination that impressed even the most seasoned members of the team. She had never imagined that one day she would stand in front of the grand mansion, not as just another maid, but as someone who held a position of authority. It wasn't just the trust Dominic had placed in her that fueled her. It was the respect she had earned from everyone in the house. Dominic had not only recognized her worth, but he had given her a platform to show it. Maria no longer felt like an outsider. She felt like she belonged. She moved through the mansion with the confidence of someone who had a place in the world, a world she had once thought was closed off to people like her. One afternoon, as Maria was checking in on the staff in the kitchen, she noticed that Dominic was once again in the study, the door slightly ajar. She hesitated for a moment before knocking softly on the frame. "Dominic," she called out, her voice calm but filled with curiosity. He looked up from his desk, his sharp eyes meeting hers. For a moment, she saw something in his gaze, a quiet intensity that she had come to recognize as his usual focus. "Maria," he said, his voice steady but warm. "Come in." She stepped into the room, her heart fluttering in her chest. She had been working closely with him for months now, but each time they spoke, she still found herself a little nervous around him. Not because he was intimidating, but because of the respect he commanded. "How are things going?" he asked, leaning back in his chair as he studied her. "Everything is running smoothly," she replied, her tone confident. "The staff is doing well, and the house is in order." Dominic nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Good. You've been doing excellent work." The praise, though familiar now, still made her heart swell. She had worked her entire life for recognition, but never had she expected it to come in the form of Dominic Romano's approval. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but sincere. "I appreciate your trust." He studied her for a moment longer, his expression thoughtful. "I'm glad to see you so comfortable in this role," he said, almost as if he was speaking more to himself than to her. "I never expected to be here," Maria admitted, her voice soft. "But I'm glad I am." Dominic nodded again, his eyes narrowing as if considering something. "I think it's time for you to take on even more responsibility." Maria blinked, her heart skipping a beat. "More responsibility?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," he said, standing up and walking toward her. "You've proven yourself capable of managing the staff, but there's more to this house than just the day-to-day tasks. I want you to oversee the security team as well." Maria's eyes widened. The security team? It was an unexpected request, but then again, nothing with Dominic ever truly surprised her anymore. "I don't have experience with security," she said, her voice uncertain. "You don't need to be an expert," Dominic replied, his voice firm but reassuring. "You've already proven that you can handle anything I throw at you. I trust you, Maria. You're more than just someone who manages staff. You're someone I rely on." His words hit her with a sense of weight she hadn't expected. She had always viewed her role as just a way to make a living, a way to support her family. But now, Dominic was offering her something more, a chance to be truly trusted, to be a part of something bigger. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Dominic said without hesitation. "I'm sure." He walked over to the window, looking out at the grounds. "This mansion, this family, it's more than just a place of business. It's a home, and I want it to be safe. I need someone who can see everything, someone who knows how to take charge. That someone is you, Maria." Maria stood there, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She had never expected to be in this position, but here she was, trusted with more responsibility than she had ever dreamed of. "Thank you, Dominic," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I won't let you down." Dominic turned back to face her, a rare smile spreading across his face. "I know you won't," he said simply. As Maria left the study that evening, she felt a sense of purpose and pride fill her chest. She had come so far, from being the invisible maid to someone who held a key position in the mansion. And Dominic's trust, his belief in her, was something she would never take for granted. She wasn't just a part of this house anymore. She was integral to its security, its well-being, and its future. And for the first time in her life, Maria felt like she was truly in control of her own destiny. It had been several weeks since Dominic had entrusted Maria with the responsibility of overseeing the mansion's security, and with each passing day, she grew more confident in her role. The transition had been a challenging one, but Maria had always prided herself on her ability to adapt. She was no longer just the maid in the shadows. She was someone whose presence commanded respect. As she moved through the mansion now, she carried herself differently. She was aware of the eyes that followed her, but instead of feeling like an outsider, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Her relationship with Dominic had also grown deeper. There was a quiet understanding between them that had evolved over time, an unspoken bond built on trust. They often exchanged small words of encouragement, and occasionally, when the mansion was quiet, they would talk about things outside of the household, about their lives, about their pasts. Maria had always known that Dominic was a man of power, but as she got to know him better, she began to see that there was much more to him than the cold, commanding presence he projected to the world. One afternoon, Maria was in the study, reviewing the security team's reports, when Dominic entered, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a look of concern. "Maria," he said, his voice steady, "I need to talk to you." She turned, standing up instinctively, her posture alert. "Of course, Dominic. What's going on?" "There's something I've been meaning to address," he said, walking over to the window and looking out at the sprawling grounds. "I've been under a lot of pressure lately, and it's starting to affect the way I manage things here." Maria watched him closely, sensing that he was about to say something important. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the faint lines of worry etched on his face. She had never seen him like this before, vulnerable, unsure. "What do you mean?" she asked gently, taking a step closer to him. Dominic turned to face her, his dark eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, there was silence between them, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "I'm not sure if I'm handling everything as well as I should," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "The family, the business, the mansion, it's all starting to take its toll on me. I don't want to let it affect you or anyone else here." Maria felt a pang of sympathy for him. She had always seen Dominic as the strong, unshakable Mafia boss, but in that moment, she realized that even he had his limits. "You've been carrying a heavy load for a long time," Maria said softly. "But you don't have to do it alone. You've got people who care about you, Dominic. People who want to help." He looked at her for a moment, as if weighing her words. Then, slowly he nodded. "I know," he said, his voice steadying. "And I appreciate that more than you know." The air between them shifted, the connection between them deepening. It was as if, for the first time, Dominic was allowing himself to be human, to show a side of himself that wasn't just about control and power. Maria, in turn, felt a surge of warmth. She had always respected him, but now she saw him in a new light, as someone who wasn't invincible, but someone who was willing to trust others, even when it wasn't easy. "I've been thinking about something," Dominic continued, his tone more thoughtful now. "I think it's time for me to take a step back from some of the daily decisions. I've been so focused on the business that I haven't had time to think about what matters most, the people in my life. I don't want to lose sight of that." Maria's heart fluttered at his words. She had always known that Dominic's focus on his empire came at a cost, but hearing him admit it was something entirely different. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to take on more," he said, his gaze unwavering. "Not just managing the staff, but overseeing the operations of the business. You've shown me that you're capable of handling it. I trust you, Maria." His words hit her like a wave, and for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She had never imagined that Dominic would trust her with something so important. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You've already proven yourself to me," Dominic replied. "And I believe in you. I can't keep running everything by myself, and I need someone I can trust to keep things moving forward. You've earned this, Maria. You've earned my trust, and more importantly, you've earned your place in this world." Maria swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his trust settle over her. This was more than she had ever expected, more than she had ever dreamed possible. She had never seen herself as someone who would rise to the top of the business world, but here she was, being offered the chance to do just that. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice full of determination. Dominic nodded, his expression softening. "I know you won't. I'm counting on you, Maria." As she left the study later that evening, Maria felt like she was walking on air. She had come so far from the woman who had walked into this mansion, unsure of herself and her place in the world. Now, she was a trusted member of the Romano family, someone who had earned respect and power. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that this was only the beginning. With Dominic's trust and support, she was ready to face whatever came next, and to prove that she was more than just a maid. She was someone who could change the course of her own destiny. Maria had always known that working in the Romano mansion was more than just a job. It had been a way to survive, a means to support her family, and at first, it had seemed like an insurmountable challenge. But over time, as she had earned Dominic's trust and respect, something shifted. It was no longer just about survival. It was about building a future, not only for herself, but for those she cared about. Now, as she sat at her desk in the study, reviewing reports and planning the next steps for the household and the business, Maria could hardly believe how much had changed. The quiet confidence she had gained over the past few months had transformed her into someone who wasn't just part of the staff, but someone who played a key role in the operations of the mansion and the Romano Empire. She had taken on more responsibilities, and with each decision she made, she realized just how far she had come from the woman who had once cleaned the floors and kept to the shadows. It was a strange feeling, but one that she had learned to embrace. She was no longer invisible. She was important. The staff respected her, and Dominic trusted her. And now, with the weight of the Romano business on her shoulders, Maria felt like she had finally found her place. That afternoon, as she was organizing the files for the upcoming week, she heard a knock on the door. Looking up, she saw Dominic standing in the doorway, his usual composed expression replaced with a hint of seriousness. "Maria," he said, his voice steady, but with a note of concern. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" Maria stood up, her pulse quickening slightly. She had grown accustomed to Dominic's presence, but there was something in his tone that told her this conversation would be different. "Of course," she replied, walking toward him. "What's on your mind?" Dominic stepped into the room, his dark eyes meeting hers with a focused intensity. "I need to ask something of you," he said, his voice low. "It's about the future of the business." Maria nodded, silently urging him to continue. "The Romano family has grown, and with that, we've had to make some difficult decisions," he began, his tone measured. "I've been thinking about how we move forward, and I think it's time for you to take on more than just overseeing the mansion. I want you to help with expanding the business operations. You've proven yourself capable, and I believe you're ready for this next step." Maria's breath caught in her throat. This was something she hadn't expected, even with everything she had accomplished so far. The idea of being involved in the expansion of the Romano Empire was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had always thought of herself as just a caretaker, just someone who kept the mansion running smoothly. But now, Dominic was offering her a chance to be part of something much bigger. "Are you sure?" Maria asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "I know you're capable of more than you realize," Dominic replied. "You've been with us long. Enough to see how everything works. You understand the family's values, the business principles. I trust you, Maria, and I believe you're the right person to help us grow." Maria's heart raced as she processed his words. She had never imagined that she would be asked to step into such a pivotal role. The idea of being so deeply involved in the family business was daunting, but she knew it was an opportunity that she couldn't pass up. She had come so far, and now, Dominic was offering her a chance to take everything she had learned and use it to shape the future of the Romano Empire. "I don't know what to say," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't need to say anything yet," Dominic said, his tone reassuring. "I just wanted you to know that I'm counting on you. This is a big responsibility, but I know you're more than capable of handling it." Maria felt the weight of his words settle in. She wasn't just being offered a chance to prove herself. She was being trusted with the future of the Romano family. "I won't let you down," she said firmly, her resolve strengthening. "I know you won't," Dominic replied, his eyes softening. "That's why I'm giving you this opportunity." As he turned to leave, Maria felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and now, Dominic's faith in her was giving her the chance to take her place alongside him, to shape the future of the family and the business she had come to be a part of. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She wasn't just someone in the background. She was someone who mattered, someone who had a role in the future of the Romano Empire. And for the first time in her life, Maria felt like she was truly in control of her own destiny. The days ahead were uncertain, and the challenges would be great. But Maria was ready. She had already proven that she could handle anything that came her way. And now, she was ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that she had earned her place in the world. She wasn't just a maid. She was someone who could change everything. The days following Dominic's offer were filled with anticipation and an undercurrent of excitement for Maria. She had never imagined herself in this position, a woman who had once been relegated to the shadows, now standing at the helm of something far greater. As she walked through the mansion, the familiar halls felt different now. They were hers as much as they were anyone else's. The weight of responsibility that had been placed on her shoulders was substantial, but Maria had never been one to back down from a challenge. She had always worked hard to survive, but now, with Dominic's trust, she was working to thrive. The first task she took on was organizing the expansion plans for the Romano business. It wasn't just about making sure the mansion ran smoothly anymore. It was about ensuring the business side of things was aligned with the family's future. Maria sat at her desk, meticulously going over documents and meeting with various departments. The transition wasn't easy, but every step she took made her feel more confident in her abilities. She wasn't just managing a household, she was managing an empire. She had never realized how much she could accomplish until she was given the opportunity. As the days passed, Maria found herself spending more time with Dominic, not just overseeing the staff, but also discussing future business strategies. Their conversations were often long and in-depth, filled with discussions about expansion, security, and family matters. Dominic had always been known for his commanding presence, but there was a quiet intensity in these moments that made Maria feel like she was seeing a different side of him, a side that trusted her judgment, valued her input, and wanted her by his side in shaping the future. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and paperwork, Maria sat in the study, sipping on a cup of tea, when Dominic walked in. The usual calm in his stride was replaced with a slight air of exhaustion. Maria looked up, noticing the change. "Long day?" she asked, setting her tea down and standing up. Dominic nodded, his expression softening as he walked toward the desk. "You could say that," he replied with a small sigh. "But it's worth it. We're making progress, and I've got you to thank for that." Maria felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had always thought of herself as just a part of the household staff, but now, Dominic was thanking her for the contributions she had made to something far larger than herself. "I'm just doing my job," she said modestly, but her voice betrayed a hint of pride. "No," Dominic said, turning to face her. "You're doing more than that. You're helping to shape the future of this family, and that's something no one else could do the way you have." His words made Maria's heart swell. She had always been driven by the need to prove herself, to show that she was capable of more than what people saw on the surface. And now, Dominic was recognizing that. She wasn't just a maid or an assistant. She was an integral part of the Romano family's future. "Thank you, Dominic," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "It means a lot to hear that from you." He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze intense, before walking over and standing beside her. "I don't say it enough, but you've earned it. I've seen your work. I've seen the way you've handled everything, and I'm proud of you, Maria." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so many years seeking approval, trying to find a place where she truly belonged. And now, here she was, in the one place she never imagined she would be, standing beside Dominic, the man who controlled so much of the world around them, and hearing him say that he was proud of her. For a moment, there was silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came with mutual respect, understanding, and a shared sense of purpose. "We're in this together," Dominic said finally, his voice low. "I need someone like you. Someone who understands what it takes to keep everything moving forward." Maria nodded, her resolve firm. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Dominic replied, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's why I trust you." As he left the study, Maria sat back in her chair, her mind racing with everything that had just transpired. She had come so far, from the maid who had been invisible to the woman who now played a key role in the Romano Empire. She wasn't just a worker. She was someone who had earned a place in a world she had never imagined being a part of. And as the days passed, Maria knew that she was ready for whatever came next. With Dominic by her side, she could face any challenge. She was no longer just a part of the background. She was a force in her own right. Maria's days had become a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and overseeing the operations of the Romano business. She had grown into the role with an ease that surprised her, considering the magnitude of the responsibilities that had been placed on her shoulders. She now understood every aspect of the family's empire, not just the household management, but the business dealings, the investments, and even the complex network of relationships that kept the Romano name strong. Every decision she made was important, and she knew that Dominic was relying on her judgment. She could feel the weight of it, but it didn't scare her. It motivated her. The once intimidating figure of Dominic Romano was now someone Maria had grown comfortable with. They worked side by side more often, discussing everything from the future of the business to personal matters. And through it all, Maria saw a side of him she hadn't expected. He wasn't just the ruthless mafia boss the world saw. He was a man who, despite his power, had his vulnerabilities and his own way of caring for the people who mattered to him. One evening, after a particularly exhausting week, Maria was in her office, going over financial documents, when Dominic walked in. He didn't have the usual air of businesslike detachment that he normally carried with him. Instead, there was a weariness in his eyes, a sense of fatigue that she hadn't seen before. "Maria," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Can we talk?" She looked up from her papers, surprised by the tone in his voice. "Of course," she replied, gesturing for him to sit. Dominic took a seat across from her, his posture relaxed but his expression pensive. "I've been thinking about everything," he began, his eyes meeting hers. "The business, the family, everything we've built. I've always prided myself on making sure I'm in control of everything. But recently, I've realized I can't do it all alone." Maria leaned forward slightly, sensing that this conversation was going to be different from the others they had shared. "You've built an empire," she said carefully, "and you've done it on your own. But that doesn't mean you have to carry the weight alone now. You've got people who care about you, people who are willing to help." Dominic looked at her, his gaze intense, as if weighing her words. After a long moment, he sighed. "I know," he said, his voice quieter now. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what comes next for me, for this family. And the more I think about it, the more I realize I need to trust others to take on more of the burden." Maria sat silently, letting his words sink in. She could sense the struggle in him, the desire to remain in control, while also recognizing that it was time to let go, at least a little. "I've trusted you more than anyone else, Maria," he continued, his voice steady but soft. "And I know I can't keep running everything by myself. That's why I'm asking you to step up even more." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Dominic's gaze softened as he leaned forward. "I need you to take over more of the business operations. Not just overseeing the staff, but managing the larger aspects of the empire. I'm not going to be able to do this much longer if I keep holding on to everything. You've earned my trust, and I believe you're the one who can take things forward." Maria's mind raced. This was a huge responsibility, one that went far beyond anything she had done before. She had never imagined herself overseeing the entire Romano empire, but here was Dominic, asking her to do just that. "I'm honored that you trust me with this," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of responsibility." Dominic smiled faintly. "You've been ready all along, Maria. I've seen it in the way you handle things, the way you've risen to every challenge. I believe in you." His words, simple as they were, held so much weight for Maria. It wasn't just about the trust he had placed in her. It was about the faith he had shown in her abilities. She had never seen herself as someone who could run an empire, but now, with Dominic's support, she could see that it was possible. "I'll do my best," Maria said, her voice filled with determination. "You have my word." "I know you will," Dominic said softly. "And I'll be here to help, to guide you. But you're the one who's going to lead this family into the future." As he stood up to leave, Maria felt a sense of resolve settle over her. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She wasn't just a manager of the household. She was someone who had been trusted with the Romano family's future. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them head-on. Over the following weeks, Maria threw herself into her new role. She met with business partners, negotiated deals, and made decisions that would shape the future of the Romano Empire. It wasn't easy, and at times, she felt overwhelmed by the weight of it all. But every step she took made her feel more confident in her ability to handle the responsibilities that came with being at the helm of the family business. As the days turned into weeks, Maria found herself growing into the role, no longer doubting her abilities, but embracing the power she had been given. She wasn't just a part of the Romano household anymore. She was an essential part of its future, and with that came a sense of pride and purpose that she had never known before. And Dominic, ever the protector, was always there, offering guidance, but also stepping back and letting her take charge. Maria had earned her place in the world, and with Dominic's support, she was ready to build the future she had always dreamed of. Maria had learned to adapt quickly to the responsibilities that came with overseeing the Romano family's operations. What had begun as a simple task, managing the household staff, had evolved into a much larger role. Now, with the family's business expanding, she had become integral to its growth. Every day, she was involved in meetings, overseeing business decisions, and ensuring that the empire her family had built continued to thrive. It was a far cry from the life she had known before, but Maria had found a sense of purpose that she had never imagined. As she moved through the mansion, her confidence grew. She had earned the respect of everyone around her, from the staff to the business partners, and even Dominic himself. Every day, she proved to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever believed. One evening, after a long day filled with meetings, Maria sat in the study, her mind racing with thoughts about the future. The pressure had been mounting, but she had learned to handle it. She was ready for whatever came next. The door to the study opened, and Dominic walked in. There was a quiet tension in the air as he entered, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a slight unease. "Maria," he said, his voice steady but softer than usual. She looked up, sensing something was different. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Dominic walked over to her desk and stood beside her, his eyes meeting hers with a seriousness she had not seen before. "I've been thinking," he began, his tone thoughtful. "I've trusted you with so much, and you've proven yourself time and time again. But I need to know if you're truly ready for what's to come." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Dominic looked down for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "The future of the Romano family is at a turning point," he said slowly. "The business is growing faster than we anticipated, and I need someone I can rely on to handle everything. Not just the day-to-day operations, but the strategic decisions that will shape the future." Maria's mind raced as she processed his words. She had always known the stakes were high, but now, it seemed like everything was on the line. "I've seen what you're capable of, Maria," Dominic continued. "But this isn't just about overseeing the mansion. It's about taking the Romano family to the next level. I need you to step up in a way you've never done before." Maria swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling in. She had already proven herself, but this was something entirely different. She had always thought of herself as someone who could handle anything thrown her way, but this was a challenge like no other. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. Dominic looked at her, his gaze steady. "Are you sure?" he asked, his tone soft but searching. "This isn't just about running the household anymore. This is about leading the family into the future, making decisions that will affect not just us, but everyone in the business. You'll have to make tough calls, and not everyone will agree with you." Maria nodded, her resolve strengthening. "I've come this far because I'm willing to make those tough calls. I know what it takes to move forward, and I'm ready for the responsibility." Dominic studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Good," he said, his voice steady again. "I believe in you, Maria. You're the one who can take this family to the next level." The weight of his words settled over her, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, Maria felt empowered. She had worked hard to get to this point, and now, she was being asked to take the reins. The future of the Romano family was in her hands, and she was ready to lead. As Dominic left the room, Maria sat back in her chair, her mind racing with the possibilities. She had always known that one day, she would have to make her own mark on the world, but she hadn't expected it to come so soon. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, but now, she was stepping into the light. She was no longer just the maid, the woman who cleaned the mansion and managed the staff. She was a key player in the Romano family's future. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and decisions that would test her. But Maria knew that she was ready. She had Dominic's trust, and that was all she needed. The future was hers to shape, and she would do whatever it took to make sure the Romano family's legacy continued to grow and thrive. The mansion had always been a place of power, a place where the wealthy and influential gathered. But now, it felt like Maria's place too. She was no longer just a part of the background. She was a force in her own right, ready to take on whatever the future held.